I'd like to first congratulate Her Excellency Huber and her amazing team at the UAE government, which we worked with over the last couple of years on Project Zero Bureaucracy. Should we just give that remarkable team a hand, please? I'd like to start being a bit black and white. I hope you don't mind. By looking at this topic through the lens of the citizen and through the lens of the customers, given the fact that 20 years ago Amazon introduced one click, the expectations of those folks out there has become extremely high. So how do we navigate that landscape? Let me just share a couple of thought-provoking statistics, and I know I will provoke a couple of people in this room, but to get permission to build a new road in Germany on average takes 2.4 years. In Germany, it takes 7.4 years in the United States. Taxes, 5 minutes in Estonia and 13 hours in the United States. Driver license, 1 day and even less in Mexico. 4 months in France, I apologize. And then, look at this, passport here in the very UAE 5 days, and the US 6 weeks. Now when you think about this, it's just numbers, I know. But how does it feel if you are a citizen or a customer experiencing that? Let me just share with you a Spanish clip which can give you a sense of the feeling of that.
Espera un momento.
Quería darme de alta en autónomos.
Ventanilla de información, modelo TA1. Lo cumplimenta en esa mesa y después.
Lo he traído relleno.
No ha rellenado esa casilla. Vaya a las mesas de la entrada y...
He traído 2 copias, escritas y revisadas.
Le falta el impreso de Hacienda. Y la fotocopia. Muy bien, Rubita. Tú lo has querido. Fotocopia del DNI. Número de cuenta. Fotocopia de la tarjeta de la Seguridad Social. Fotocopia de los impresos de Hacienda. Doble fotocopia del modelo 036, numerado y grapado.
And the movie is playing in a government near you. Why do I share this? Well, I share this because when we work with governments and with companies around the world, we quite often see the reality. The best way of illustrating the reality is really what you see up here. It's a true video one of my friends filmed. The fact that we've done that before, it didn't work, or by the way, compliance will never allow that. Or the policies were saying in the old days it was not possible. But the reality is we need to pause for a second and ask ourselves, how do we get around this? And I'm going to do a bit of an experiment with all of you. But before I do that, what happened a couple of years ago was pretty interesting. What happened was that this delegation you're seeing up there made history in the United States. Because what you see on the picture is not Republicans and it's not Democrats, which, by the way, originally were not allowed to drive in the same bus on the inauguration day, the onboarding day into the Senate when they were sort of the first day in school. Because they were separate, in two separate buses, because they should not talk. And this is the first picture ever taken where they're driving in the same bus. So there was an exchange of empathy happening. And directly thereafter, there was now evidence that people actually started to work together. Those two policies actually creating a reality because they started to talk across those party lines. But here's my question, how do you feel? How do you feel? Because what we have learned is that empathy is directly correlated with common sense. Empathy is the ability to place yourself in the shoes of another person and feel what that person is feeling. And what we learned is that common sense is exactly the same. So the less empathy we have, the ability to place myself in your shoes, the less common sense and empathy do we have. So, as Benjamin Franklin once said, common sense is something that everyone needs, few have and none think they lack. Or as Phil Jackson said, in order to solve this problem, the strength of the team is each individual member. The strength of each member is the team. So I want to be very practical here for a second. Just share with you the problem we have and the root cause of all this. Here's some recent statistics showing that 23% today across governments, and by the way, corporations, are engaged in their work. That's a remarkably low number if you think about it. And look at this. 62% were definitely not engaged. There's not a lot in between. And even worse, 50% were actually disengaged, so they went against the whole thing. That was the core mission. Wow. Which comes back to my question to all of you. I'm going to do an experiment. I hope you're okay. Have your phone ready, because I'm going to share with you 10 photos, and they're not random photos. These photos you will see up there are photos we picked up by working with governments and worked with corporations around the world. And they're encapsulating the essence of what people feel in organizations. When we show these photos, they are the top 10 ranking photos across the world. Now, the reason why I'm asking you to be engaged is I would like you in your mind to pick the photo which you feel is reflecting the essence of how you feel in the government or in the company you're working in. And then I'd like you to do a vote in 10 pictures from now. You ready? So this is one of them. I'm sure you recognize this one here. This one here is we open and we close. We have kinds of a schizophrenic thing. Yes or no, we really don't know. And then this one here, the big loudmouth, psychological safety or the lack of in the organization. Silos, we all know that one, don't we? Or what about this one here? Completely overbooked calendar with a meeting after meeting after meeting. We can't even go to the toilet anymore. Or this one here. The walls are squeezing, the oxygen is squeezed out of the room. I can't really survive. Or this one here, a square peg in a round hole. It doesn't fit that policy. This doesn't fit into what people really want. Or this one here, it's my favorite one. It's daunting. I just can't, it continues on and on and on. Or this one here. What? Is this, what? You know what I mean? Or this one here, oh, it's a goodie, this one here. Chaos. Are you ready? Everyone had the phone ready? Because what I'm going to do now is to ask you to go into Menti.com, take a photo of this alternatively, and then you should go straight into a voting page. And I'd like you at this voting page now to pick the one photo the one photo you feel is covering this. And before
The
I
three
do
people on
that,
the
let me
left
just
are
go back.
actors.
Ooh.
They've been briefed to stand
Let's go back.
or sit.
While you are voting, I would like you just to figure out what is the number one. You ready? I think we have a couple of seconds more. Good. Is everyone good? Fantastic. Let's take a look at it. Oh, we have a runner-up here. Option 10, which is the chaos, and this one completely overbooked, is basically leading with number 3, the silos. Well, let me just tell you a little bit about this. You are very much aligned with the rest of the world. And what's even more amazing is that we increasingly, when we talk to people, they say to us, I feel completely overwhelmed every day when I go to work. Just a quick question to all of you. How many of you would say that you feel overwhelmed with the amount of emails you have in your inbox every day and literally can just not follow up and catch up to all that stuff you have in your inbox? Raise your hand. And then look around, because that's reality. Here's my question to you. Why is that happening? Let me share a little video, which is a true experiment conducted on that very topic.
The three people on the left are actors. They've been briefed to stand or sit when they hear this. Everyone else that's brought in is a genuine shortlisted applicant. They've been given no instructions other than to fill out their forms. My team and I were secretly watching from another room. The more socially compliant a person is, the more they're likely to look to others for signs of how to behave.
This is going to be your spot.
And the more people, the greater the pressure to join in. In this case, whether to stand or sit. Those people that didn't follow the crowd were removed. I didn't get to lose Amy, sadly.
With me?
Once we had a full house, we got rid of the actors, leaving us with a room full of compliant people standing up and sitting down, even though nobody told them to do this.
So there's a saying that if you're too close to the forest, you can't see the forest for just trees. This is the essence I would like to address right now. So we did an unusual experiment just recently. First of all, I asked ChatGPT to go in and look through all the queries I've given ChatGPT since it was invented 2 years ago, just to analyze who I am without telling it anything, just to look at all the data and insight. And ChatGPT worked on that for a couple of seconds, and this is a very flattering photo of me. Don't even laugh here. But look at this person here, which supposedly is me. Now, what's really interesting is, yes, it's fine. It's noticed I fly a lot. But have you noticed one little detail? There's no phone. What ChatGPT picked up was that I actually haven't had and owned a phone for 9 years. I literally don't have a phone. ChatGPT picked it up. It saw a little detail which we normally would never pick up on. So we decided to go even further and say, hey, would it be possible to go even further? And to learn from what Einstein once said, which is, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I would spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. If we step back for a second and look at what the problem is, what is the solution? So here's what we did. We teamed up with a couple of companies. We looked at all the data which each of the person had put through ChatGPT and other algorithms, and then we started to analyze it and ask the algorithm to create a photo or an illustration of what the essence was in that organization, on that government. And I want to share with you 3 photos. They're anonymous, of course. We don't want to put anyone in the spotlight here, but take a look at this. This is one photo created from one organization based on what people type into the algorithm. And as you probably can see here, there is quite a lot of silos here. No one works together, no collaboration. Everyone is sitting in their own little domain with basically no synergies happening. Picked up based on how we put in our inquiries into an algorithm. Or this one here, I think a lot of people feel like that. One person is the bottleneck, which have to be completely stretched to different things. On this one, here's my favorite. Look at this. What's interesting is you have the Eiffel Tower on top. You have all the ships trying to go into reality, and then you have the frozen middle, which is completely paralyzed, which, by the way, is an issue we've learned a lot about. Here's when we map down the issues in governments and in companies. Here's the map. You have engaged and disconnected here. This is the silos. You have the fixed and the contextual oriented on the right and left. That's where we basically adapt to the reality very quickly. And do you know what's interesting? Common sense lives up there, and the opposite of common sense, nonsense, lives there. Do you know what differentiates it? What separates those two things? It's the frozen middle. It's that paralyzation from orders given from the top, which for some reason never really resonates with the middle. So here's my question: how do you get around that? And by the way, what does it mean? The best way I can illustrate that is a couple of years ago, I was sitting in Miami in a hotel. I wanted to watch television, so I used my remote control, which looked a little bit like a spaceship. It had 2 on buttons and 2 off buttons. And when I clicked the first on button, the light went up. The television didn't switch on. Anyway, I managed to switch on. I watched television for a couple of minutes, wanted to switch it off again. Pressed the first off button, and the light dimmed in the room in kind of a moody, sexy way. When I pressed the second off button, the air conditioning system switched off, but the television was still running. So I managed to switch it off and forgot everything about it. And then, believe me or not, 3 months later, I'm sitting on a plane next to this American guy, and I said to him, "So where are you from?" And he says, "I'm from a company you never heard about." I said, "What company is that?" "Sonic Blue." "Sonic Blue?" I said, "What the heck went wrong with you guys?" And the guy, he looked at me like a deer in the headlight. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I can't use your remote control." He said, "Well, I'll tell you why. We had a lot of fights about this real estate." He called it real estate. So we decided to split it into zones, because we had Netflix department, the TV department, we had the recording department, the streaming department. So I said, we had a brilliant idea. Why don't we split it into different departments? So each is responsible for each of the areas on the remote control. And he said it worked brilliantly. Except the fact that I can't use your remote control. Is it possible to make it a simpler version, perhaps? Just asking. I'm sharing this with you because we call that the chicken cage syndrome. An experiment was done some years ago where chickens were put into a cage, stuck in it for half a year, and one day they were let out on the beautiful green grass, and the sun was shining, and the birds were singing, and the chickens went out. And after 30 seconds, what do you think happened? Exactly, you tried it. They went straight back in again. I call it the chicken cage syndrome. The chicken cage syndrome is also what I define as the immune system, the defense mechanism for change. And these are real comments. You can take a photo of it if you want to use them. These are the real comments we've experienced time after time, amplifying that. How do you solve that? Well, nothing is hard if you divide it into smaller steps, Henry Ford once said. And I think the best way of me illustrating how you solve bureaucracy, how you defrost the frozen middle and break down that immune system, can be inspired by that.
What I have here is a chain of dominoes. Each one is 1.5 times larger than the previous one. And the smallest domino is about 5 millimeters high and 1 millimeter thick. And I will carefully place it. And there are 13 dominoes. And the largest domino, it weighs about 100 pounds and is more than a meter tall. Ready?
I shared it with His Excellency Omar from the UAE government, and I think he told me that if you add 5 other bricks, you're turning over, flipping over the Empire State Building. We talked about movement this morning. I think Her Excellency Uda mentioned that. Movement is that. When you want to change in a government or in an organization, you need to work with the movement. And the movement basically means this. If you break it down, there's 4 different things you should do. First of all, you have to look at the world inside out and outside in. Inside out is which processes in your organization are truly frustrating, or which of your product, service, or interactions would your customer like to improve. Now that leads to the second thing we've learned. What are the assumptions justifying the current approach? And this is important. If we scrap this approach and stop pretending people are rational, what will they change? We are not rational. Most of the stuff we do is deeply irrational. And then this is important. This is back to what we saw before. Having 90 days to succeed. Which of your changes require the least effort, generating the biggest impact? Just hold this for a second, and just let me share a little case. A couple of years ago, Swiss International Airlines asked us to see if we could address this issue. And one of the issues you have is when you're flying, you may feel a lot of frustrations. Maybe you downgraded, maybe you lost your suitcase, maybe you missed your connection. And then you go on the plane, and guess what? You complain, and then nothing is happening. So here's what we did with Swiss. I tend to say that if you want to study animals, don't go to the zoo, go to the Amazon. The most important thing you can do is not to see the world from inside out, but to change it and see it from outside in. And how do you do that? Well, in the Swiss case, we went one step further. If you take a look at this, which of your product, services, interaction would your customer like to improve or kill? Well, in this case, in Swiss, it was very simple. Compensate me now when I'm a passenger, furious that my screen doesn't work on the plane, rather than I'll give you a compensation form and we'll talk again in 6 months from now on. The second thing is, why didn't they do that? What's the reason why? Well, Swiss said, there's a lot of theft going on in the air. We don't prefer to give compensation. We don't control the staff. So they outsourced it to the ground. That was the excuse. What we said then was this. Well, provide immediate compensation in return for immediate customer gratification. Very simple, straightforward. Not a lot of excuses, a lot of red tape. And here's what's so interesting. As we did that, something remarkable happened. When we started to give people compensation in the air, the yearly cost reduction was 41% because it cost 89 Swiss francs to manage the complaint on ground. Why don't we just take this money and put them into the air? And 2, the Net Promoter Score improved with 12%. But here's the most remarkable thing coming back to culture. We noticed the ENPS, the Employee Net Promoter Score, improved with 67% because suddenly the person, the cabin crew, had a mandate, they had a role. They were not just puppets anymore. They could actually act on a situation. It comes back to those small steps we talk about, the corn you put in action. And it sounds so easy what I'm saying, but it's not. 9 years ago, there was a huge strike at the tube in UK, in London. The whole UK, almost the whole tube went down. It didn't work. So people had to find another way to get to work. And later on, 48 hours later on, a team of scientists went through all the numbers, the statistics, to see what really happened. And what they learned was really interesting. The 48-hour strike forced people to find another way to get to work. And in fact, that other way meant that people on average saved 6 to 7 minutes. They had no idea. It was fast to go to work. Now this is the brilliant part. Here comes the shocking part. How many people do you think went back to the old routine despite the fact that they now have saved 6 to 7 minutes? Well, look at this. Only 5% changed the path. 95% went back to the old routine. That's the chicken cage syndrome. And this is how it looks like back on the map. You have common sense on the top left. But what's interesting is, as you're a startup, your entrepreneurial company, it grows because you feel the pain of your customers. As you grow and it becomes worse and worse, that goes down in size, and nonsense grow because you want to protect what you have. This is where compliance, rules, regulations, bureaucracy, and all that stuff is growing. This is the essence of why governments are struggling, because we want to protect things. If I put it into a different light, it looks like this in the private sector. In the good old days, let's take shipping, for example. When you go from destination A to B, there was 2 KPIs, delivering things on time and having a happy customer. Then they went on Wall Street, they had to have quarterly announcement earnings. So each department is split into small pieces, and each of them have each of the different KPIs. Basically meaning this, that you have one department which are responsible for trade, that's revenue. Sales is measured on volume, operation on cost, customer services experience, and global shared services on efficiency. Now this is where the problem happens. Once this happens, these small mini KPIs become their own little ecosystem, each going in each of the different directions, and the silver lining, which is the customer or the citizen, disappears out of the picture. We're going from outside in to inside out perspective. So you have to, if you want to fix this, you have to change the internal perspective to an outside in perspective. Now I just want to share a quick case just to give you that point. This is Maersk, the largest shipping company in the world, and I want to go back to the thing we talked about here. Which of your product, service, or interactions would your customer like to improve or kill? Well, in Maersk, they had a bit of an issue there. The issue was that when you are sending out a shipment with a container, the container is typically stocked in the port for a longer time than what was planned. In fact, what we learned was that 65% of all these containers are what we call, in technical term, rolled. It means they have to wait for another round and another round until they leave the harbor. So the first question is, why is my cargo rolled? Why is it so delayed? And what we learned was, what are the assumptions justifying this approach? Well, Maersk was saying to the world, customers should be better at planning their logistics. A pretty arrogant point of view. Then we said, what is the solution? Very simple. Let's ask for upfront payment. Now, in the industry of shipping, they've never in history asked for upfront payment, which means that people are overbooking a lot, which means we have rolling going on a lot. And of course, it's pretty logical for all of us to say that. But when I back to Maersk, they said, no way, we don't want to do that. If we are the first in the world doing it, we will lose market share. So how do you persuade an organization which is 100 years old, the largest shipping company in the world, they invented the container, how do you persuade them to change their mind? My dad always said that if you want to get ahead of the leader, don't follow his tracks in the sand. So basically what we did was unusual. We asked people at Maersk, what company do you really admire? Who's the number one you really love? And they all said, we love Uber. Amazing. Uber is fantastic. They're fast. They're simple. They're to the point. Then we said something else to them. Imagine that Maersk buys Uber. And because people love Uber so much, they could feel that pain. And then we said to them, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could suddenly simulate what was going on? And what we did was, we simulated across the world the feeling of how Uber would collapse if Maersk applied their way of thinking to the service we all like. What we did was to apply empathy to people's minds so they felt the pain. And the consequence was that Maersk changed their mind. And this was the result.
Imagine if a restaurant was like shipping. What would it be like? Well, ordering would mean lots of paperwork. And it's, complex. Once you place your order, everything seems fine. Unless, of course, there's an overbooking. When that happens, you might be rolled. So it's quite common to place extra orders, just to be on the safe side, but not always letting the supplier know that you did, and all the while the price might change, or extra fees might be added. This is quite a challenge, when all you want is a clear overview of your price.
At Maersk, we believe it's time for a change, and we're going all the way to make it happen. Introducing Maersk Spot, a loading guarantee, easy online booking, and a fixed price.
And a revolution in the shipping industry. Did it work? I guess you could say so. This is my message to you. Break it down, exchange empathy, and make sure you have small proof points of hope. In summary, this is what I've learned. Point number one, you need to mix the two camps. You need to make sure it's co-created everything. That's what Her Excellency Huda have done with the Zero Bureaucracy team with huge success. You do make sure that you feel a shared purpose which you are directed through. You need to make sure that you'll see your own picture from outside in, and as Einstein said, formulate the problem and spend the majority of time with that. You can't do it yourself because you're too close to the forest to see the trees. You make sure that you look into the frozen middle and ask yourself what's causing it. And once you do it, break down to chicken cage syndromes to say, well, how do I get people out of the chicken cage? Well, you do that by ensuring you take one piece at a time. You break it down to smaller success points, not the big picture, the little thing which can create the internal hope and defrost the frozen middle by looking at it from an outside-in perspective, i.e. for the citizen or from the consumer's point of view. And then you benchmark against another one, someone you love, admire, but not people operating in your own industry. As I tend to say, bureaucracy is like cholesterol. It builds up over time, showing everything down until nothing moves. Thanks, everyone.
Our sincere thanks to Mr. Martin Lindstrom for a thought-provoking session.